Great, and we're live. Thank you very much. Anna from Porcelains Institute, and we're pleased to be joined today with James Poisant from WITSA. I'll let you introduce yourself, James.
All right, my name is Jim Poisant. As Anna mentioned, I'm the Secretary General of the World Information Technology and Services Alliance. It's a consortium of leading ICT associations in over 80 countries. And WITSA represents over 90% of all the IT companies in the world. So we're very proud of that, and I'm quite honored to have the position of Secretary General of the organization.
Excellent. Thank you, Jim, for making the time to be with us today. This is going to be a short interview on digital transformation. As you know, the NRI 2020 is being launched in October. So you've had the questions on your screen. Let's jump into the first question, which is the need for digital transformation. Can you tell us a bit more about your organization, how its digital transformation strategy might have changed due to COVID, and if you think the pandemic has in any way kickstarted digital transformation in your organization or in your sector?
Let me try to respond to that question from two angles. One of them is the organization, which, being who we are, we've been digital since digital happened, so it's not something that we needed to be pushed into or had to invent, writing about the digital revolution, the digital age. As a matter of fact, our vision is to fulfill the promise of the digital age. In other words, when our job is done, hopefully every person on earth who is willing to be connected and benefiting from ICT will be. And of course, right now, half the world is not connected. So from an organizational standpoint, it's not something new to us. Now, in terms of direct impact on our business, there's some good and bad news. And before I go any further, Anna, I'd like to, whoever's listening and watching this, stay well and be very wary of this virus, because there's no exceptions here in terms of carelessness. So, just be safe out there, and, someday this is going to be a memory, hopefully sooner than later. But so there's good and bad news with the COVID virus. WITSA has, since 1978, has hosted a major event called the World Congress on IT. And we've had up to 5,000 people as recently as October of 2019 attending these events. So obviously, these are a big deal for us. They're our major revenue generator. They're our major opportunity to brand WITSA, and it involves 80 to 90 countries. So this has been something we have been blessed with for many years. Now here comes COVID, and we had our 2020 Congress scheduled to happen actually this month in Malaysia. It had to be postponed until 2022. Now that's a big hit, because that all the work that has been done up to that point, we had over 100 speakers confirmed. For those of you who have been in the event business, that's not a minor thing. When you prepare for an event that could have 5,000 people from 90 countries, there's a lot of work that has to be done in preparation. So given that's happened, hybrid conference. That is, there'll be people physically there, but mostly it'll be virtual, and pretty much all of our speakers will be coming in virtual. So next, let's see, in November 14th, we will be hosting something called the Road to Penang, Malaysia. That is a sampling of what the Congress is going to be in 2022. Now, the beauty of this is, and it's unfortunate that it has to happen, but what's going on now is that this natural evolution toward remote meetings is being pushed forward at a rapid rate. The technology is being pushed forward. People are being forced into it, and particularly in the area of education, where they're going to have to deliver remotely. So this technology is probably the one that's benefiting most from the disaster of the COVIDs. The long-term benefit of that is when you look at the developing world, if once this technology is pretty well proven, and it is now in terms of the platform we're on right now with Zoom or Microsoft, is proven, but what we need to do is to get the content and people used to using it. And as this spreads around the globe, the content will be captured, and many people, particularly in the developing world, will benefit from these lectures and the platform and so on. So that's kind of a side benefit from in transformation. That transformation, what's going on right now because of the COVID, is going to transform education faster than it ever would dream of doing on a normal evolution. The other thing that's happening, which is to me a natural occurrence, but again expediting, is that as you look at the people who are using this technology, many of whom are young, and the young people are becoming accustomed to this. And I have several grandchildren who are now watching videos from school. They are becoming intuitive, just like they are with the smartphone and other, to this technology. So when you look at people traveling to having a choice to go across the world or across the street to go hear somebody, it becomes a no-brainer for people, particularly the younger people who are becoming so ingrained with this as a standard practice of living and communicating. Why would they even go across the street if they can press a button and watch the person on the screen? Not only that, they can ask that person questions remotely, which they could never do in an audience. So you see that there's a confluence of occurrences that are smacking together here to cause a hybrid world of not only affecting the meetings that WITSA performs, but also the everyday life of people and the whole educational system. And now it's going to be much more used in the business world. When you consider now people having to stay home and being forced to meet online, what they're finding is that they can get as much work or more work done in their own homes and being able to communicate around the world without going to an office. So all of that's changing, and that's going to have a serious impact on rental space, the way business is conducted, meetings. So all of that's happening as this seismic shift is making everything move in different directions. So let me stop there. But I think in terms of as I mentioned, the organization, we're certainly being affected, but I'm not really sure that it's all negative to us. Let me just mention one more thing. As we depend on revenue from these events, a lot of the revenue, most of the revenue is coming in the door. That is, we're going to have sponsors giving us money, but we're going to have 5,000 people paying a fee. Well, as those days are gone, if you now look at the new world, what's the virtual audience potential? I tend to bet if we do it right, that is, I think there are 4 major components to doing this right. That is, if you had the content, and if you had the platform, and if you had the database, and if you were able to market appropriately, then chances are, instead of 5,000 people paying $1,000, you may get 100,000 people, paying $400. So from an economic standpoint, it makes much more sense to go virtual for almost every reason that I just mentioned. Okay.
Excellent, thank you. Not to mention the hidden cost of the event. Very good, thank you, Jim. We'll move on to question 2. What about inclusion, diversity, and the digital divide? What can you tell us about this? The question would be, how can digital transformation be leveraged to rebuild more inclusive, diverse, and equitable economies and workplaces in this post-COVID world?
That's a tough one. That's a tough question, because my limited exposure to diversity in the workplace, particularly for the people with disabilities, it's not working. There are more and more people with disabilities shut out of the workforce. I think that has a lot to do with ignorance in terms of the employer, and I'm not convinced that population, that community, has done what it can do in terms of proving that there's very little difference between people's ability to work, only that is one disability or whatever the physical or mental constraint is. So people are capable of the work. The problem is connecting the two, connecting the people who sparse the work out and the people who are on the other end. Now, let me share with you a real problem and a real opportunity. There's a disconnect between people who employ and people with disabilities, and there shouldn't be. Let me just use my industry. I'm talking about the ICT industry. Literally hundreds of thousands of jobs go open every day in this industry, which could be done out of anybody's home. Most of this work doesn't have to be done on a floor, a factory floor, or in an office building or anything like that. It can be done remotely, and it's being done remotely. So there's a need to provide education to people who can provide this service, so that people in the disability community, which by the way is getting larger every day with people getting older. So that community grows exponentially as this world's population ages. So I'm struggling to give you an answer in terms of what's the solution. But I believe that the problem is laid out fairly simply. That is, we have people who need jobs. We have jobs that need people. We have education that needs to happen to close the gap. We need an attitudinal switch in terms of people who employ to seek out that community that can help them. So there's lots of fingers pointing every way, but the problem is not insolvable. The problem is solvable if there's a will and an understanding of how to do it. I don't know where we are. I think there are a lot more people that are a lot more expert than I am, including Shane Kennedy, who's sitting on your as one of your senior fellows, who does this for a living. There are ways to solve the problem. I just think it's a matter of the right parties coming together at the right time and to show best practices of how this can actually work. Show people at work, at home, being productive, and companies being satisfied, more than happy with the work coming in. The problem's there. It just needs to be tied together to be solved.
Absolutely. Thank you very much. And you did touch on working from home. What can you tell us more about unemployment? Yeah, obviously, this crisis might cost the job to a few hundreds of thousands of individuals, but then maybe some other positions might be created. thanks to digital transformation. Would you have any concrete example to share on that one?
I can give you my thought about this is that, like it or not, we are in the digital age. Like it or not, we are out of the Industrial Revolution. The jobs of the past are in the past. Anybody that thinks they're going to make money on digging coal is being lied to, because that's an industry that's going out, and it should be going out. So if you look at all of the industries, the digital age is taking over a lot of the requirements of the jobs. Now, what does that mean? It means that instead of whining about my job's lost and I don't like the politician that won't keep the coal mines open, whatever the excuses are, the reality is that the governments have to get involved with the educational process and do a sweeping change of the curriculum to bring everybody into the digital age so they can compete. The jobs are there, and the jobs will continue to be there. They won't be in the same form. They could be a lot better. They could be a lot cleaner. They could be a lot more high paying. Let me digress for a minute and use an example of an educational, not an experiment, but an educational program that's been running out of Armenia and now spreading to France and other countries. Maybe even Spain will have this. Have you ever heard of the Tomo Foundation? T-O-M-O, Tomo. There was a fellow Armenian fellow who's in the United States, made a lot of money from the high-tech industry, went back and contributed to building a new model of education in the country of Armenia. And it's absolutely amazing for a couple of reasons. A few years ago, I went to Yerevan, the capital of Armenia, and I was given a tour of the Tomo Foundation. Now, what this is, it's a 6-story building, which is absolutely jam-packed with kids. You won't hear a sound in the building. There are kids from, I think the age is, I could be mistaken, but they're like 4th grade to high school, something like that. And once you reach, I think, 18, you can no longer be in the foundation. But I took a tour, and I was with the executive director, and I started asking her a lot of different questions. So who pays for this? It came in from a philanthropic donation. Okay, what are the kids doing? Well, they're all working individually. Okay, how do you grade them? We don't. How do you teach them? We have a very limited staff. So I kept on asking all these questions. By the time I was finished, well, let me go back. How do you grade them? When you look at the screen that the kids are working on, they have like little merit badges all over the screen, like little icons. And these icons demonstrate the things they've passed. So, I mean, some kids have 100 of them, some kids have 10, but every kid is on an individual learning curve based on their own capabilities. What do? They know everything about computers and technology, everything, meaning they can take a computer apart, put it together again. They can write code. By the time I got to the 6th floor, I was watching something that I just wish I could share with you. I walk into a room and there's like 20 kids performing a symphony that they wrote on the computers. And these kids don't even own computers. So I'm saying, okay, what is going on here? At the end of the tour, I made a dumb comment by asking this woman. I said, you know, Microsoft must love it, must love you and love it. And she looked at me like I was out from another world. And she said, why would you ask if Microsoft? I said, because you're training people from Microsoft. She said, no. We're in the digital age. And I feel like really stupid because of what I do. To hear this, you know, she's kind of backing me up here. She said, look, we're in a digital age. Our kids are competing against the best around the world. Who do you think is going to win when the bank comes looking for people to work in IT, when the insurance company comes, when Microsoft comes, when the airlines come, who do you think they're going to hire? Our kids. That to me was a wake-up call, because what they have done is they basically turned the model inside out. If you look at education everywhere, pretty much, what you find, like in college, kids have to take a coding course or something like that. Then that's not preparing them for this world. So I think if you look at that attitude and that model of what they did in Armenia and now what they're spreading, they've got one in Paris again. I think they've got one in Spain, and they're moving it. This is the future. So there's no reason why every school system in the world should not have a functioning model such as the Tomo Foundation, because that's where the future is.
Excellent. I really like the Tomo attitude, we'll call it. In another interview, Simon Kemp mentioned mindset. Like the mindset has to change. We are in a digital age, etc., etc. So now attitude, I think, is a key word. And I like how you took the question from a youth and future generation perspective. This is really nice. Mm-hmm. Great. So question number 3 over here. I think you touched a bit on it. What can you say about reskilling and upskilling and lifelong learning for future-ready firm government societies to be competitive and to be thriving in a crisis world, or not even a crisis world?
I'm going to answer that in a very, very short but very meaningful way. What governments need to do is they need to put ICT at the core of every decision they make. That will drive what they have to do. In other words, look at ICT, look at the technology. When you're going to make a decision on networking hospitals, networking schools, training, if you look at ICT as the core in your circle, as the major consideration, then make your decisions based on that. This is not a program on the side that you're going to do like it's good to do. You're going to invest in it maybe next year. No, you've got to look at it from the core of your soul of, well, how are you going to now function with that as your primary focus? And then if anybody walked away with that, I think that would be great. Every decision they made.
That's what I call short and sweet. Mm-hmm. Very good. So I guess it comes back to policy making and governments being held responsible, right, for ICT being at the core of everything. Very good. Moving on to question number 4. When it comes to economic development and competitiveness, what would you say are powerful tools to achieve the SDGs? Do you have any example on that? Or in other words, how can digital transformation remain human-centric and ethical?
Well, I mean, the SDGs, I think ICT cuts across all of them in one way or another. And I think the UN is picking up on that. I think you'll see more and more focus on technology from the United Nations on those goals. So, I mean, I want to congratulate them. They're doing great. I noticed that in the beginning, the uptake of that inclusion into the decisions took a little bit of time. But now I think they see it in education, they see it in health. Everything that they're doing, poverty, the gender gap, all of it, it has an ICT element involved in it. And I took a shot at the education area. I mean, healthcare, the management of records. I was on a kind of related subject. I was appointed a couple weeks ago, actually, to the board of Operation Smile, board of directors of Operation Smile. They're the guys that go around the world fixing cleft palates, the children. And they've now operated on 300,000 kids. Colvitz has put them back. They have a waiting list now of 10,000 kids waiting for them. But here's a good example of what is possible. And I'm going to share the story with you, and it's kind of stay tuned to what's going to happen here. But there's a story about the palm oil plant in Malaysia. Palm oil is the #1 export and revenue producer for Malaysia. I don't know. So palm oil is in everything. It's in food, it's in cosmetics, it's everything. Now, from forever, they were not getting 100% yield out of these trees because they were infected. And every year they would lose X amount of billions of dollars because of the genome in those plants were causing diseases. So they hired the guys that unraveled the DNA. I don't know how many millions of dollars the government spent with these guys, but they found out what was going on in these palm oil plants. And they were able to inoculate the whole crop. And today it's nearly 100% productivity out of those plants. Well, what's that got to do with healthcare? Well, if you look at Operation Smile, they have thousands of samples of the DNA from the children that they've operated on. Why can't we do the same that we did on the palm oil plant? Figure out what genetic problem is causing cleft palate, and then figure out how to inoculate the world. So this is something I'm trying to bring to Operation Smile, a way in order to take those samples and then figure out a way to solve the disease. Because the problem is not that Dr. McGee, the head of it, is not doing a phenomenal job, but there's 10,000 kids waiting, and there's another 10,000 kids being born today with the same problem. So unless you are able to eradicate it, you'll always have a need for Operation Smile. And then you look at other diseases, look at cancer and so on. So I think the technology in that realm can be magnificently successful in solving disease problems around the world. And that again, I can go on and on about technology and the SDGs, but I think the World Health Organization, others that are dealing with this on a day-to-day basis, they are using IT as much as they can. I've met with the World Health Organization in Geneva a few times. They've hired a guy, they've promoted a guy to be the chief technologist for the IT department. We're working with him. So I don't know. I mean, I don't know if that answers the question, but best I got.
Absolutely. No, this is great and very human-centric, whether it's health or other industries. Last question would be, what would you tell the old Jim Poisant of back in February? It's a bonus question, sorry, I hope I'm not putting you on the spotlight. Before the crisis or the pandemic happened, what would you have told yourself? Is there something you would do differently to prepare for a crisis, to be reactive, proactive, when it comes to digital transformation? Is there anything you can think of? It's really just a bonus question.
I'm sure if I've given enough time, I could probably think of a better answer that I'm going to give you. But because this thing, the virus has kind of crept up on us, and we're now living in this environment, I'm not sure I would have had an aha moment in this process. I think we've kind of dealt with it. We're still dealing with it every day from a political standpoint, from a health standpoint. We're losing 1,000 people a day in the United States. That's unacceptable. We've got people walking around without masks because the president tells them it's okay. This is not right. So, and he doesn't wear one. So we've got a dilemma here that we've got to solve. Going back to the core question of digital transformation, I do have a bit of advice that I've been talking about for many years. that I'd just like to share, particularly with governments. You need, in my humble opinion, having traveled the world and spoken to governments everywhere at every stage of their evolution of the technology industry, you need to do a couple things. The number one thing is to hire somebody that is going to champion ICT development in your country. Someone who gets up in the morning and can't wait to do the next thing in line with getting the world, getting your country digitized and getting them into the digital age. Number one. Number two, you must have a long-term, comprehensive digital plan, a digital agenda. And there are samples out there that if anybody wants to communicate with me, if they're going to see my email or whatever, just let me know. But there are samples and countries that are willing to share those plans with you. With respect to the long-term comment, what you find is, let me give you a real example. A few years ago, traveling through South America and Latin America, I found that out of the 16 countries that I was working with, 14 of them had overturned or turned over their political systems or political regimes in the last year or so. And in every case, every one of those new ministers of technology, many of them are not qualified, many of them are political appointees, threw out everything the guy did before them, or the woman did before them. Why? Because when you find people running for political office, the nature of the beast here is everything the guy did before me was no good. That's why I'm elected and I'm going to save you type of, no. So what happens is that when you throw a plan out the window and you're in the middle of connecting schools and that gets delayed, or you're connecting hospitals or government and that gets delayed or thrown out, all you're doing is wasting time and money and going further and further behind. So I thought that the best example that I could give them or give you is in the situation in Korea, where what they did was they actually changed the Constitution. They had a constitutional amendment that said, look, you see this 10-year plan or 8-year plan? Don't touch it. You cannot touch it. Now, some may argue that you need to re-examine the plan, and I agree with you fully, but do what Korea does. Every 18 months, they take the plan out, they put it around the table, and they say, what has happened in the past 18 months that has affected this plan, and we need to change it. And then there's they have to almost have a unanimous vote to change whatever they're going to change on that plan. So a champion, a plan that can't be altered from political whim. And lastly, you must commit the resources to get it done. You need to put the money aside. You need to have this plan funded. And I can guarantee you that you will win big time. If you're looking for additional votes as you move forward, you'll get them, because what you're going to do is you're going to impact your whole society. You're going to benefit everyone from not only now, but for the foreseeable future. So I want to thank you for allowing me to answer that particular question, because I think that would be the advice I would give to countries.